Okay, we're ready to go back on the record. And now we are switching to the building trade. And Michael Sabitoni is your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. And I want to, before we get started, excuse me, as he makes his way up here, I want to thank the board and all the attorneys for being flexible and accommodating with our witnesses now. So thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Sabitoni, can you state your name for the record and spell it, please?
Michael F. Sabitoni, S-A-B-I-T-O-N-I.
Okay. Can you, I think they just did with the jury. And could you also tell us your position, please?
I'm president of the Rhode Island Building and Construction Trades Council. I'm also business manager of the Rhode Island Laborers District Council and Laborers Local Union 271.
Okay. And why are you here today, Mr. Sabitoni?
Jobs.
Okay. I'm going to show you what I think is on your desk here, which is known as RIBCT City, which I'm going to call from now on the building trades. Building trades exhibit number 2. So you can look up for me. Does that is that an accurate representation of your professional background?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And do you have any corrections to make on that?
I did notice a discrepancy in the first line, the first sentence. One describes myself as a second-generation laborer, and I believe there's a prior document as a third-generation laborer. So I would make the correction that I am a third-generation laborer.
Okay, if you could do that on that document, and then initial and date it. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, where is that?
Sure. I think it's on the first line, Madam Chair.
Got it.
In the green book in front of you is also Building Trades Exhibit number 1. Could you describe that, what that document is?
It's the testimony I've submitted as intervening in this proceeding.
Okay. Do you have any corrections or modifications to make to your testimony?
Not this time.
Okay. Is your testimony true and accurate?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I have no further questions, Madam Chair.
Questions, Ms. Perkins?
No questions.
Just for the record, we've informed Ms. Lucarelli of this, but for all witnesses going forward, CLF and the town of Oroville has agreed that the order of attorneys would be Jerry Owner first and me follow. Just, it makes it a lot simpler if we know we're going to go in that order. So I defer to Jerry this time.
Right. Check.
CLF has no questions for this witness.
But I do have some questions, so thank you. Morning, Mr. Sabitoni. Is it still morning? Yes, it is.
Morning.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Second day in a row of testimony.
Tough night last night, so I'm here this morning.
So you were testifying last night about the Payne building,
That's correct.
and if that building is approved, what years do you think it would be constructed?
At this time, I'd be able to guess on that. I haven't had those type of conversations with the developer. Too premature in the process.
Right. In terms of this project, what are you assuming, if it's approved, the construction years would be? About 3 years?
Probably about a year after the approval of this guesstimate, maybe a year thereafter under construction, and then the duration of the project itself.
Okay, so you think they can build it in 1 year?
No, it would start probably within a year, maybe a year tops to start, and then whatever the construction schedule would be after that.
Any idea ballpark how long that would be? Years?
I haven't got into the schedules either with the construction manager, et cetera. But guesstimate, I would guess, in my construction knowledge, maybe 3 years.
Okay. And in terms of those out years, if this is approved, could you tell me, let me back up. I assume you've got a pretty good handle as to what construction projects in Rhode Island are on the drawing board, so to speak, in the next few years.
To the best of our ability, yes.
That's basically your job, right?
That's correct.
All right. Could you tell me, in general, on a high-level basis, I'm not looking for details, what construction projects are on the drawing boards in the years that would overlap the correct facility?
Anything similar in scope of the magnitude of this project?
No, I'm not. This is huge. So the answer to that would be 0.
That's correct.
No, I am.
Loretta, I would object only because it's 3 years out. So I think it's a little speculative.
I think he's okay so far.
So I'm not looking for anything that's the same size as this. I'm looking for substantial construction projects, say in the $100 million and up range, that are on the drawing boards for the next few years.
3 years out, that are definitely gonna go, that are over $100 million. When I say definite, I mean that we are absolutely banking on as a building trade. I would say 0.
Okay. And that would, of course, include this because it has no permit yet, correct?
That's correct.
Those that you are pushing for, those that you are supporting, like your testimony last night on the Fane building, your testimony here today, which projects, what projects are on the drawing boards here in Rhode Island? Not definitely slated to go, but you hope will go.
I mean, there's numerous projects that are on the drawing board that go through different processes. So, you know, they could be at a given point along the way at any given time. So, you know, to speculate in 3 years from now what will actually come to fruition would be difficult at this time. Evident of what we're doing here this morning.
I understand. But I'm not asking you to speculate what's going to come to fruition. I'm asking you to tell me which projects that are on the drawing board, at least, you are supporting right now that are going to happen in the next 3 or 4 years.
Not many. Fane Tower downtown, maybe the second phase of the Wexford development on the 195 land. You know, north of $100 million, there aren't very many.
What about the Paul Sox Stadium?
I wouldn't describe that. The stadium alone is in excess of $100 million.
Okay, what do you think that would be?
Guesstimates were through the process are somewhere in the mid-80s.
Okay. What about the offshore wind project?
Offshore wind, looking at the developments going forward, probably would be further than 3 years out.
But it's on the drawing boards, right?
They're on the drawing board.
And that's certainly over $100 million.
Yes.
What projects are your people working on right now that are major projects?
Probably the largest project right now is the Series A and Series B buildings at the electric boat facility in Quonset Point, Rhode Island.
Okay. How many workers would you have on that in total?
It just started the site work. We're getting ready to implement the concrete work, so it's starting to escalate now. We guesstimate at peak about 600 tradesmen and women.
And you were interviewed in an article regarding the offshore wind, correct?
That's correct.
They were saying that'll be about 800 workers if it goes.
If it goes, the estimate was between 600 and 800 workers in the Port of Providence, that's correct.
Now, there's been a lot of focus in the testimony here about whether the workers on the site will be from Rhode Island, and whether the benefit will go to Rhode Islanders and not to other states. You're aware of that?
Yes, I am.
And the intention is there will be a project labor agreement for this facility, correct?
That's correct.
But as of now, there is no such agreement, correct?
There is a letter of intent, which is normal and customary prior to we commence negotiations. So we have a letter of intent signed by Invenergy to negotiate fair terms and conditions under a Rhode Island Building Trade Project Labor Agreement.
But that's just an agreement to negotiate. It's not a binding contract.
It's normal and customary in our industry.
Well, I'm not challenging that. I'm certain that it is, but it's not a binding contract like a project labor agreement.
No, it is not.
And would it be your intention that there would be a provision in the project labor agreement that would require all the employees to be Rhode Island residents?
The provision, recognition in the project labor agreements that we negotiate under the Rhode Island Building Trades have what we call recognition clauses that identify the local unions in the state of Rhode Island that are members of my council that have first preference, first recognition for first referral to any project under those agreements.
But that preference does not, therefore, exclude the employment of union members that would be from neighboring Massachusetts or Connecticut, correct?
Our estimates, when we look at projects of this size and magnitude, similar, like I've mentioned, at Electric Boat, are usually 80-20. 80% Rhode Islanders and 20% from either Massachusetts or Connecticut predominantly.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right about that, especially for something like down at Quonset. But you're aware that this facility is located in the northwestern corner of Rhode Island, less than 5 miles from the Massachusetts border and less than 5 miles from the Connecticut border, correct?
That's correct.
And so would you think there would be more interest in working on this job from people who live in Massachusetts and Connecticut than they would have going down to Quonset?
Between the years of 1991 and 1993, I worked personally on the Ocean State Power Project in Burrillville, which is even closer to the Massachusetts border, and that 80-20 scenario was true on that project as well.
Right. Was there a project labor agreement for
Yes, there
Ocean
was.
State?
There was a national project labor agreement with a company by the name of Evasco.
But just to make it clear, there's certainly no legally enforceable prohibition that would prevent a union worker who lived in nearby Massachusetts or Connecticut from working on the job.
There's currently a project going on in Blackstone, Massachusetts, and I would suggest that there are probably closer to 30% Rhode Islanders working on that project in Massachusetts. So it's a regional economy to an extent, but those are the numbers that usually happen on projects of this size, no matter what state you're in. As a matter of fact, we also worked on the Killingly power plant in Connecticut, and those numbers were similar. There was 75-25 Connecticut residents and 25% Rhode Island residents on that project as well. So we've got a history and a track record that gives us the ability to guesstimate what the manpower residencies would be on projects similar.
Madam Chair, I'm not going to move to strike his response, but it was non-responsive to my question. And I would ask the court reporter to read my question back.
But just to make it clear, there's certainly no legally enforceable prohibition that would prevent a union worker who lived in nearby Massachusetts or Connecticut from working on the job.
There are provisions in the recognition clause that the exhausting of the local union hiring hall must happen first, at which time then the hall can clear in workers from neighboring local unions from neighboring states.
All right, thank you very much. Can you tell me why the project labor agreement has not been signed yet?
There's no project yet.
So when do you anticipate In the normal course, the project labor agreement would be signed.
As soon as you're done here.
So as soon as an EFSB permit is issued, the project labor agreement would be signed.
The next step in normal progression would be the owner to then finalize his contract with his program manager or construction manager, at which time that entity would then sit down and negotiate the contract with us on behalf of the owner.
I'm sure you have your testimony with you, and if you'd like to look at it, that's fine, but I'm just going to point to one sentence at the top of page 4. And you stated, quote, "Each one of these jobs will pay at least $60,000 in wages and another $30,000 in health and retirement benefits," end quote. Is that correct?
That's on the low end, so I gave a low guesstimate. Yes, that would be per, on a, for a year.
Okay. And would you say that would be a low estimate on average? You're saying each one, you're talking about an average pay? I assume there are some skills that will be paid a little bit more and some will be paid a little bit less. Is that correct?
That estimate was used for a construction laborer at his current wage and benefit scale today, working 40 hours a week for 1 year. And the laborer would be on the lower end of the pay scale. As you get into other classifications, 60,000 is a low estimate, and plumbers and pipe fitters, tin knockers, boiler makers, those wages and benefits escalate.
Okay. So if you had to average the wages and the benefits over the course of all of your workers that would be at the facility if it goes forward, what would you say the average would be in wages, and what would you say the average would be in benefits?
More than 60,000.
Okay. And benefits would be about 30?
Benefits will probably roughly stay the same. The hourly rate of pay would escalate. Benefits are roughly in the same ballpark.
Okay. What percentage of your the members you represent are currently not employed and actively looking for work?
Trades as a whole or specific local unions?
Whichever way you'd like to answer.
Trades as a whole, unemployment right now probably about 10%. And that fluctuates pretty much on a daily basis because we work on a referral system. People come in and go out as we speak.
Now, am I correct in assuming that not every one of your union members would be qualified to work on this particular power plant? They might want to have a job, but they might not be qualified to do the work that's necessary for this plant. Is that correct?
We work on a referral system that skill sets are requested, and then depending on the request and the classification requested, that's how we would dispatch. So we do not send out anyone that's not qualified at the request of a contractor looking for a specific skill set.
I understand that. It makes good sense. My point is that you've got 10% looking for work. Let's assume that 400 jobs opened up at the power plant. Would the people represented by that 10%, would every one of those people be able to immediately go out to the power plant?
I couldn't answer that. I would suggest the answer is no. Would the entire 10% be capable at this particular point? No.
You made what I thought was a very interesting point in your interview on the offshore wind project about how it could be 600 or 800 workers.
That's correct.
But it requires workers with certain specialized set of skills to it. For example, you gave an example of an electrician. A union electrician may well be able to wire a house or wire a new office building, but might not have the abilities to be able to wire a turbine 200, 300, 400 feet up in the air, correct?
Correct.
And the same would hold true on a power plant. The specialized skills, strength, that sort of thing would be important in placing your union members in the power plant, correct?
The majority of those union members would already be traveling with existing contractors that would be signed through the construction manager for specific sets. So the existing workforce within the state, moving from project to project, would ultimately supply the predominance of the men and women necessary to complete the project. And then once that complement of tradesmen and women is maxed out, would then be when contractors would then seek further referrals from the hiring hall. So there is a fluid movement of contractors as well as tradesmen and women in and around the state of Rhode Island that would be able to supply this project.
Now, these jobs are temporary jobs, right? They last for a couple of years, 3 years.
I take offense when people call construction jobs temporary jobs. This proceeding is temporary. We perform a service. We perform a service, we build something, and then we move on and build something else.
They're limited in time per project.
Anyone that provides a service usually is limited in time.
So the answer is yes.
Anyone that provides a service is limited in time regardless of the service. Trying a case is timely.
So the answer is yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, I'm sure you're aware of the national issues with regard to placement of construction workers throughout the country. Would you agree with me that there is currently nationally a shortage of construction workers?
I would say there's a shortage of workers in all industries currently. Labor is in demand in multiple industries, including construction.
Would you also agree with me that the workforce that you represent is, generally speaking, like the rest of us, aging, and quite a few of them are nearing retirement?
Average age, building trades, I'll use a national figure between the ages of 45 and 55.
Okay. And as we discussed earlier, these are the kind of jobs that require strength, for the most part, correct?
Strength meaning?
Well, let me withdraw that and ask you a different question. I'm 67 years old. I can still sit at a table and ask you questions. I don't think I would be able to wire a PowerPoint at 67. So I guess what I'm saying is, isn't it true that your workforce is generally going to retire or move to another field at a younger age than, say, an office professional?
Well, it depends on the individual.
But you're aware that the industry does have an issue with regard to an aging workforce that is nearing retirement.
Average age of a building trade, men or women across the country, is between the ages of 45 and 55.
Well, what would be the average retirement age?
I wouldn't know that off the top of my head.
There was a survey that was released by the, well, let me back up. You're familiar with the Associated General Contractors of America?
Yes, I am.
Are you aware of the survey that they released in January of this year that said 73% of firms are having a hard time finding qualified workers?
Not aware of it.
Does that generally comport with your understanding of what's going on in the United States?
I can't comment on that without taking a look at the survey and looking at where they derive their facts from.
All right. Could you tell me, based on your experience here locally, what percentage of firms are having a hard time finding qualified workers?
Tradesmen and women, office workers, that's what are they looking for?
No, this is the Associated General Contractors of America. So this is construction work. These are construction workers.
So these are tradesmen and women?
Yes.
Yes. To my knowledge, I have not, the Associated General Contractors of Rhode Island have have not shared those numbers with me.
Okay. Now, I'm going to start working through your testimony from the beginning to end. On page 1, on line 4, you start talking about the project creating more than 320 full-time annual construction trade jobs per year from 2018 to 2021. Do you recall that?
I do.
All right. Now, I realize that your testimony was filed some time ago, but I assume you're aware that there will be no construction jobs in 2018, correct?
Correct.
And I think it's unlikely that there will be many in 2019. Would you agree with that?
Depending on how long you take here.
What about the school bus?
On page 2, starting on line 16, going to line 18, you talk about the individual unions cumulatively representing about 9,500 workers in and around the Rhode Island area. And then you go on to say that your member unions have the ability to draw upon a regional workforce in excess of 37,000, correct?
Correct.
And that would include, obviously, just want you to confirm it for me, workers in Massachusetts and Connecticut.
That's correct.
If, you said you worked on the Ocean State Power Facility, and would you agree with me that a project that's going to take 2 or 3 years is a really good project to have because it's a long-term for a construction project?
Power plant projects are known as the ultimate referral as a tradesman or woman because of the longevity of employment and the continuity of the longevity of that employment. So when people get referred to a power plant project, the people that I represent, they get pretty excited.
I would concur with that. I mean, having that long-term placement has got to be a lot of benefits, especially to your family.
Life-changing.
Yep. Would you agree with me then that if you're living in nearby Massachusetts and nearby Connecticut, that you'd really like to get a job on the Barville Power Plant?
Imagine any union tradesman or woman would like to be referred to that project. Anyone, regardless of where they reside.
Now on page 3, line 9, you start a sentence that says the workers that work on this project will be deriving 100% of their household income from working on this facility. Do you see that?
Yes.
Did you maybe misspeak there? I mean, are you assuming there that this worker is the only worker in the
Not
household?
taking into consideration a spouse's income, 100% of the individual's household income, working on the project.
So that's what you meant to say?
That's correct.
Not counting the spouse, correct?
That's correct.
Now, starting on page 10, you said that accordingly, no group of Rhode Island residents has a stronger economic and/or socioeconomic interest in the outcome of this application to construct the Clear River Energy Center in Barville, Rhode Island. Do you have that?
Could you, there is no page 10. Line 10 on,
Page 3.
Thank you.
Page 3, line 10. I apologize. I'll reread it.
Page what?
Page 3,
Page 3.
line 10.
Yeah.
Starts with accordingly. No group of Rhode Island residents has a stronger economic and/or socioeconomic interest in the outcome of this application to construct the Clear River Energy Center in Barville, Rhode Island. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Would you agree with me that the residents of the town of Barville have at least as strong an interest in the outcome of this application?
Not with a work opportunity, but maybe with the tax treaty you negotiate.
What about the socioeconomic interest of the families who live in Barville? Do you think that their interest in the outcome of this application are as strong as your members?
If you're talking about employment directly by energy, I would say no.
What about if you're talking about socioeconomic in general?
Employment, I would say no.
Okay. I understand that you say no for employment. I'm talking about socioeconomic interests. Would you agree that the socioeconomic interests of the residents of the town of Burrville are at least as strong as the interests of your workers?
Can I object? I'm not sure there's a definition of socioeconomic, and also I think he's asked and answered the question.
Well, let me try to rephrase.
That is a quote of his testimony.
It is.
I think there's a quote, I think Mr. Sabitoni answered it along the lines that he thought that he understands socioeconomic to mean employment. If Mr. McElroy wants to offer an alternative definition that Mr. Sabitoni can consider, that's something that that I can, I can see going on, but that's why I object. I think he's answered it under his definition of socioeconomic.
Let me just try to another question instead. You would agree with me that the people of the town of Burrville have a very strong interest in the outcome of this application?
Some do, yes.
Thank you. Now, we discussed this briefly, but at the bottom of page 3, line 22, you say the project will be constructed under an all-union RIB CTC PLA with union scale wages and benefits, correct?
Correct.
And that's based on your assumption that the project labor agreement will in fact be signed, correct?
That's correct.
So you don't know for a fact that it will be constructed under the project labor agreement. What you do know is that that's your intention, correct?
There has not been a powerhouse constructed in the state of Rhode Island in the last 40 years that has not been constructed under a Rhode Island Building and Construction Trades Council project labor agreement. So I base that statement on history.
I understand, but you can't guarantee it, can you?
If I was a betting man, I would guarantee it.
Okay.
For the record, Madam Chair, we can guarantee it.
Guaranteed.
I don't know how it's going to be guaranteed if you don't have an agreement in place, but I think that's for argument, so we'll argue that later. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Madam Chairperson,
Your mic, Jerry.
there was a matter concerning the timeline of the job creation that came up in Mr. McElroy's testimony, and I wonder if I could take a moment to clarify that with the witness.
Sure.
Mr. Sabitoni, you had a brief discussion with Mr. McElroy about the timeline when these construction jobs would be in existence. You recall that?
Yes.
And you said correctly that there is no EFSB permit for this project yet. Recall that?
That's why we're here.
You recall saying that?
Yes.
And do I remember correctly, you also said that after the permit was issued, there would be a lag of time, I believe you said a year after the permit, before the construction work actually started?
I gave a guesstimate of a timeline. Yes.
And did you say about a year?
I gave a guesstimate. Could be 7 months, could be a year. It all depends on time and money.
Okay. And then you said that the longevity of employment from projects like this was very, very well regarded because the construction project would take about 3 years. Is that correct?
That's my guesstimate, yes.
So today is July 19th. If a permit were issued today and CLF didn't appeal that permit and Burrville didn't appeal that permit, and there was a 7 to 12 month lag before construction started, and construction took 3 years, that permit was issued today, this plan could not be online on June 1st, 2021, which is less than 3 years from today, could it?
Can I object? He's a building trades president. He's not a forecaster of when projects start. I mean, there's a lot of speculation here.
Madam Chairperson, he testified about
Oh,
the
it's overruled. Go ahead.
Do you have my question in mind?
Repeat the question?
Could you please read back the pending question?
If a permit were issued today and CLF didn't appeal that permit, and Boroughville didn't appeal that permit, and there was a 7 to 12 month lag before construction started, and construction took 3 years, that permit was issued today, this plant would not be online June 1st, 2021, which is less than 3 years from today.
If an expedited schedule needed to be considered, then we would look at double shifts, triple shifts, depending on the necessity and the needs of an owner. We would do everything we could to meet timelines. So to answer your question, 3 years would be just a normal day. If that construction time needed to be expedited, then we would negotiate in further provisions to provide for multi-shift scenarios. And so to answer that question would be, could we meet that deadline? You know, time is money, people. If the owner wants to pay, we would do everything we could to meet it.
I have no further questions.
Are there further questions about this witness?
I think I have one or two. Let's see. Mr. Sabitoni, on page 3, and I'm looking at lines 15 through 20. You represent, we've mostly been talking about construction and builders, but you represent more trades than that. I'm just wondering if you have an estimate of the full-time jobs that will be in place post-construction.
I do not.
Now I'm looking at page 4, lines 15 through 17. Just reflecting back on your reluctance, which I totally understand, to speculate about projects years from now. I'm just wondering if you can say a little more. It says, based on preliminary estimates, the size of this project, as well as the marketplace at large, this project will probably account for 15 to 20% of the entire commercial construction market in the state of Rhode Island for 2+ years. What is that? What's the total number of jobs, or what is that 15 to 20% based on?
That number would be derived from projects that we're tracking, guesstimates that we would give out, projections 3 to 5 years from now. That would encompass both public and private works projects, as well as the membership that we represent, using the base of 9,500 and escalating thereafter. So we're probably projecting to be at that point in time maybe around 11,000 members. So, you know, we continually update our forecasts, we continually monitor projects and update, you know, when we believe they'll come online. So it's an ongoing model that we use.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Just as a follow-up to the question that Director Quaid asked, have you done, given that your testimony was submitted last August, so we're almost at the year point, has anything happened, has anything come online that would make you revise your general forecast of that 15 to 20% of the construction market?
There has been nothing that's been unexpected in the industry. The projects that we believe would come online might have been delayed, you know, a quarter or so. But our project, we're pretty much where we thought we would be at this particular moment in time.
Redirect.
Thank you. I have a few questions. First question I have is, can one of your union members be a member of a Rhode Island local and a Massachusetts or Connecticut local at the same time?
Of the same international union, no.
And so it just has to be for the Rhode Island gets first preference. Rhode Island locals get first preference. So then anyone from a neighboring state would have to wait until after the contract has exhausted all his Rhode Island referrals. Is that fair to say?
Article 1 of our standard project labor agreements are union recognition. Local union hiring laws have first preference, so the answer is yes.
Okay. You talked about a letter of intent, was brought up. Have you entered into many letters of intent for project labor agreements in the past?
Many.
Okay. Has any owner or their contractor ever not subsequently entered into a project labor agreement after you signed a letter of intent?
I've been president since 2007. To answer, in my tenure, no.
Have you ever signed a project labor agreement with an owner?
Maybe one.
Okay. And is it your understanding it's customary to sign it with the owners?
The one that we did sign was Deepwater Wind, the 5-turbine Block Island project. That was a very unique project where the owner actually acted as its own construction manager, which is very, very rare in the construction industry, which is why I answered the question one.
Okay. In the construction trade union members you represent, how much residential construction work does the unions do?
Next to zero.
So it's primarily a commercial-based referral job skill set, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, an issue of training was brought up by Mr. McElroy, and I want to have a couple of questions along this line. Do you just take in any person off the street who wants to be a construction worker?
No.
What is the process they have to go through?
Go through a rigorous screening and interview process. The three main criteria for any building trade apprentice to be considered is he has to be 18 years of age, he has to have a high school diploma or equivalent, and he must pass a drug test. That's the entry level.
So you said apprentice, so you have an apprentice program.
Multiple.
Okay. When you say multiple, can you define that?
Each craft in the building trades has what we call joint apprenticeship training committees and programs, which is how we feed our industry with the men and women that we need and bring them, starting them as first-year apprentices and bringing them through journeyman status, depending on the classification or the trade that they're in. Their programs are specific to those skills set necessary to become proficient in whatever craft they are in.
And what's the duration of your apprenticeship programs?
The shortest duration is 4 years, being the laborers. The longest, I think, is 6 years, being a master pipe fitter, boilermaker, a master journeyman electrician. So anywhere between 4 and 6 years. 4 on the lower scale, 6 on the higher scale.
And just to be clear, this is all in commercial construction?
That's correct.
What is the approximate dollar value of the market that you monitor for the construction work that you try to place your members on?
On a yearly basis,
Yeah, how much is the approximate dollar value of the products you're tracking, if you know?
looking out 3 years, probably 7 billion.
Okay. I have no further questions, thanks.
Anything further from this? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now, Mr. Cortez.
Madam Chair, I'd like to call Adam Cortez.
right hand. Stop it, where the person about it, then it's not be the truth, or truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Your full name, please.
Andrew L. Cortez. Andrew L. Cortez.
I apologize, I called you Adam, I think, so.
I'll forgive you.
I'm going to ask you to, the exhibit book's in front of you, and actually, I don't have the tabs in front of me, so I apologize. But I'm going to ask you to turn to, actually, hold on. I don't have the tab up. Thank you. I'd like you to turn to exhibit number 11. Rhode Island Building Trades exhibit number 11. Take a look at it.
Yes,
Is that an accurate representation of your professional background?
it is.
Okay. Do you have any changes to make to it?
I do not.
Okay. And then I'd like you to turn to exhibit number 10. Is that the direct testimony you submitted to this body previously?
It is.
You might want to wait until we get to what.
I am sorry.
Yeah.
You're right. I'm hungry for lunch here.
And what is it that you're looking
We are looking at the direct testimony of Andrew Cortez. I think it's Building Trades exhibit number 11. 10, sorry. I apologize. Thank you. Is that testimony you had previously submitted, Mr. Cortez? Do you have any corrections or modifications to make?
No,
Is it true and accurate?
it is.
Okay. I have no further questions, Madam Chair.
CLF has no questions for this witness.
OER has no question.
I have just a few. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Cortez. My name is Mike McElroy. I represent the town of Oroville.
Good afternoon.
Could you look at page 3? Starting on line 2, you say, to date we have been involved with at least 80 local construction projects that implemented apprentice utilization programs, which have placed 225 building futures apprentices despite the down economy. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's
And-
actually increased at this point to 265.
All right. Is it still the same 80 projects?
No, we have entered new apprenticeship utilization program projects since this testimony was filed.
So ballpark, about how many projects are we dealing with for the 265?
265 is a cumulative number over a 10-year span, so I can't recite the projects over 10 years, all 80 of them, if that's what you're asking.
Not, absolutely not asking you to do that. On line 4, you have said current number is not 225, but 265. And I'm asking you, on line 3, your original testimony said 80. What is the current number?
I have not counted since this pre-filed testimony, in full disclosure, but I would say at least 5 additional projects with apprenticeship utilization program agreements have been entered since this point.
All right, so ballpark 85, which have resulted in 265 building futures apprentices.
Yes, and that means low-income Rhode Island residents have started their career path on an apprenticeship employment.
So I'm going to do my math. That's about 3 per project. I'm not trying, there's no trick questions here.
So-
I took the 265 and divided by 85 projects and came up with 3 per project.
Well, I believe the metric, that the math equation that you're using is not exactly accurate.
Okay.
So we look at, when we have an apprenticeship utilization program agreement, that means that 15% of the total labor hours of each and every subcontractor, regardless of tier, will come from apprentices, preferentially building futures graduates.
I'm sorry, preferentially from,
Building futures graduates. So those are graduates of a pre-apprenticeship program, which is designed to serve low-income Rhode Island residents. And so apprenticeship utilization programs, 1, ensure that a contractor utilizes an apprentice workforce for 15% of the total labor hours, and 2, draw from building futures as a source.
I get all that.
Okay.
I was just trying to divide 265 by 85, and I got 3. What did I do wrong?
So I don't think that you can look at only apprenticeship utilization program agreements as the place where people are placed. People are placed, and these are talking about initial start placements, not where they continue. So you have multiple apprentices who have continued their career as they move to a next project. So if you have 265 people start, that doesn't mean 265 people don't work on every one of these projects. There's mobility within this workforce. So where the project that a person starts their career on doesn't mean that that precludes them over a 3 to 5 year apprenticeship program from working on another project. So you're looking at career starts as opposed to apprentice numbers. So I think that's the difference that's giving you math troubles.
All right, so what you're saying then is on line 4, where you talk about the placement of what was 225 and is now 265 building futures apprentices. You mean those are starts?
That's correct.
All right. So my math would work for starts. If you take 265 and you divide it by the 85 projects, you get about 3 starts per project.
I understand that you're trying to look at it in a fairly simplistic way. I would rather look at the actual projects, and I have tracked all the labor data. I can go back to each specific project and tell you how.
Oh, no. Way too much in the weeds.
Okay.
I'm just trying to get an overview.
So, knowing how many projects were signed would not give you an overview of how many people could potentially start. The total labor hours per project would give you that number. Total labor hours per project, 15%.
Okay, let's just let that testimony speak for itself, okay? On the same page, you start talking on line 8 about the average wage of the workers on completion of the apprenticeship program, and you're using $37 per hour, correct?
That is correct. That
And
is
then-
an average across 12 different craft occupations.
And then you've got benefits. Is that on top of that, or is that included in the $37?
That's on top of, so that would be an additional $23 per hour in benefits on average across 12 different occupations.
Okay. And about, are you assuming any particular number of hours per year? 2,000, 1,800, what are they looking at?
So a full-time employee would be around 2,000 hours.
Okay. Now, further down on page 3, you're talking about the project labor agreement that's anticipated for this project, correct?
That's correct.
But it, as we've established, it doesn't yet exist, correct?
I understand there's a letter of intent to enter a project labor agreement.
But the project labor agreement has not yet been signed, is that correct?
Not to my knowledge.
To your knowledge, it has not been signed, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. And on page 5, line 11 to 12, you're saying that each and every recruit will be a Rhode Islander. Now, in order to make that statement, you're assuming that the project labor agreement will in fact be signed, correct?
No, I'm not. That's our program entry requirement. Only Rhode Island residents can access the Building Futures Pre-Apprenticeship Training Program.
Okay.
Therefore, dispatches from Building Futures graduates will always be Rhode Island residents.
All right. Can you tell me, has anyone ever challenged that Rhode Island restriction?
To our pre-apprenticeship program?
Yes.
No, it's actually contingent. Some of our grant funds requires that we work with Rhode Island residents only.
Is it Rhode Island grant money?
That is correct.
But the question is, has it ever been challenged? Has anyone from Massachusetts tried to participate and been told, sorry, this is only for Rhode Island, you can't participate? Has anyone ever challenged it?
Nobody's ever challenged it.
Okay. Page 6, lines 3 to 4, you say that 53% of your graduates were formally court involved. What do you mean by formally court involved?
A conviction of some form or another.
All right then, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
No questions from the bench.
Any questions? Any questions? Not a possible question. All right, if there's no further questioning, excuse me.
Your Honor, Madam
Yeah.
Chair, I do have one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, Richard. Does Massachusetts have a similar program to Building Futures in the state, in the Commonwealth?
There are multiple programs that have based themselves off of building features, many of which operate in Massachusetts, building pathways being the primary one.
Do they focus exclusively on Massachusetts residents?
That is correct.
No further questions.
Okay, now I think we're done.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. I have to ask counsel, are we going to go to the additional witnesses? Excellent. I suggest that we do break for lunch and that we get back here in an hour. Is that okay? Excellent. Thank you very much.